Gnashing teeth, razor talons, a terrible roar. Such qualities evoke a singular word: monster. The concept of a monster is a common occurrence in storytelling across the entirety of the human race. A terrible beast driven by the slaughter of human beings serves as the perfect subject of interest for any tall tale. And just as we tell stories of terrible beasts wreaking havoc on humanity, we subsequently tell stories of courageous, exemplary heroes having the means to fight back against these monsters. There is undeniable appeal in watching a beloved and virtuous hero slay a foul and loathsome beast. Perhaps it appeals to human nature to be safe from material threats of teeth and claw. Yet entertaining as the notion is in and of itself, these monsters and what it means for the hero of the tale to best said monsters is often extremely revealing, both of how the storyteller wants the audience to think, as well as of the society that story was first synthesized within. It's hard to think of a case of this being more true than with the monsters in the Old English epic of Beowulf. Each monster that Beowulf faces off against throughout the story holds great narrative importance, whether embodying a primordial concept, symbolizing an aspect of Anglo-Saxon society, or, at times, acting as a reflection of the character of Beowulf himself. In this video, I will be leading a tour through the myriad of monstrous antagonists that appear in Beowulf, focusing specifically on the symbolic significance of each creature, starting, of course, with the most famous beast in the entire epic, the murderous, bloodthirsty, ontologically evil, yet perhaps tragically misunderstood monster that is Grendel. King Hrothgar, son of Halfdane, served as a benevolent ruler of the people of Denmark, leading a successful war campaign and earning prosperity for his people. As a testament to his wealth and fortune, the glorious Harrowit Hall was constructed as a place of merry for Hrothgar to distribute the spoils of his wars to his friends and retainers. However, as they often do not, these good times did not last. So times were pleasant for the people there, until finally one, a fiend out of hell, began to work his evil in the world. Grendel was the name of this grim demon. Haunting the marches, marauding round the heath and the desolate fens, he had dwelt for a time in misery among the banished monsters, Cain's clan, whom the Creator had outlawed and condemned as outcasts. Grendel, a descendant of the biblical figure Cain, who had murdered his own brother Abel, begins a series of terrible assaults on Harrowit Hall. A threat unlike anything Denmark has ever faced, Grendel wreaks havoc unopposed, slaughtering dozens of men at a time only to return the very next night. It is in Grendel's original motivation for his attack that we are first clued into the literary significance of the beast in this story. Grendel is a native to the land of Denmark, having made its forests his homeland long before Hrothgar and his Danes moved in. It's stated that Grendel only starts targeting Harrowit Hall in retaliation to the loud music and laughter echoing out from the hall each night. Through this lens, Grendel himself can be seen as somewhat of a tragic figure in the narrative, a victim to Hrothgar's marauding. In this way, Grendel acts as the embodiment of the evils of this society. Their own sins of colonization come back to haunt them. In the aftermath of Grendel's rampage, Hrothgar is humbled and desperate, angry with himself for failing to protect his people, while lacking the strength to do anything about it. Upon hearing of the conflict overseas, Beowulf, Thane of Gateland and the shining example of a monster-slaying hero in Old English literature, dutifully travels to help the country in need. He vows to meet and utterly destroy the monster during its next raid. Here, a predominant aspect of Beowulf's character shines, his pride. So confident in his own abilities, Beowulf sheds his weapons and armor before the fight. When it comes to fighting, I count myself as dangerous any day as Grendel, so it won't be a cutting edge I'll wield to mow him down, easily as I might. He has no idea of the arts of war, of shield or swordplay, although he does possess a wild strength. No weapons, therefore, for either this night, unarmed he shall face me, if face me he dares. And may the divine Lord in his wisdom grant the glory of victory to whichever side he sees fit. In this moment, the other avenue of Grendel's symbolic nature comes into light. With the pair going into battle completely devoid of armor or weaponry, the fight is both reduced and elevated to that of primal conflicts between the fundamental ideas of Grendel and Beowulf. Having been provoked by the conquest and sins of man, Grendel represents the primordial concept of evil. Additionally, through his status as a descendant of Cain, the original murderer shunned by God, Grendel exists as a complete antithesis of all that is good and holy in the world. The next night, Grendel attacks and resumes his terrible rampage, snatching up men at random and gorging himself on their flesh. His feast is interrupted when his talons find their way to Beowulf, being met with a strength even greater than his own. The pair engage in deadly combat. The captain of evil discovered himself in a hand grip harder than anything he had ever encountered in any man on the face of the earth. Every bone in his body quailed and recoiled, but he could not escape. Fingers were bursting, the monster backtracking, the man overpowering. Stumbling in fury, the two contenders crashed through the building. The hall clattered and hammered, but somehow survived the onslaught and kept standing. The story goes that as the pair struggled, mead benches were smashed and sprung off the floor, gold fittings and all. At last, the deadly fight draws to a close. The monster's whole body was in pain. A tremendous wound appeared on his shoulder. Sinews split and the bone lappings burst. Beowulf was granted the glory of winning. Grendel was driven under the fen banks, fatally hurt to his desolate lair. His days were numbered. The end of his life was coming for him. He knew it for certain. And one bloody clash had fulfilled the dearest wishes of the Danes. The outcome of this fight, and the ease with which Beowulf claims victory, serves as evidence towards Grendel's status as a being of pure evil. Just as he is the opposite of worldly good, Grendel's opposite is the opposite of Grendel. In the moment of their combat, Beowulf embodies the pure, holy righteousness of man, bestowed with power from God. Given the heavily pious nature of the society, it's only natural that the creature favored by God will obtain resounding victory in this fight. The evils of sin are simply no match for the holiness of God. This is further evidenced by Beowulf's prideful decision to shed his equipment before the combat. He claimed that the outcome of the battle would be determined by whichever side held the Divine Lord's favor. Beowulf is rewarded for his pride, as it is later revealed that no blade on earth, no blacksmith's art could ever damage their demon opponent. Thus, through his motivations, his ancestry, and the complete and utter defeat that he suffers at the hands of the splendid and holy Beowulf, Grendel's symbolic significance as the embodiment of evil is revealed. Having suffered a total loss, Grendel retreats homeward from whence he came, soon to perish from his mortal injuries. Beowulf's victory over Grendel is promptly celebrated with feast and treasure, solidifying the warrior's status as a true hero. Yet the peace the warrior won did not prove to last. Then it became clear, obvious to everyone once the fight was over, that an avenger lurked and was still alive, grimly biding time. Grendel's mother, monstrous Hellbride, brooded on her wrongs. She had been forced down into fearful waters, the cold depths, after Cain had killed his father's son, felled his own brother with a sword. While Beowulf was elsewhere, slumbering in a separate lodging, Grendel's mother seeks vengeance for her son and attacks Harrowet Hall in the dead of night, kidnapping and slaughtering one of Hrothgar's closest advisors. It is in Grendel's mother's motivations and actions that we see her symbolic role as a reflection of societal gender norms at the time. In principle, her attack could be seen as honorable in warrior culture, as she does so in an attempt to avenge her son. Yet the idea of a warring mother, a female, violently exacting revenge in the same way that the men of the time so regularly do, is an inherently foreign, alien, and monstrous notion at the time of Beowulf's synthesis. In this way, Grendel's mother represents a facet of Anglo-Saxon society. Beowulf heroically sets out, following the trail through the woods left by his quarry, and eventually arrives at the terrible swamp that Grendel's mother has made her home. A dreadful place, the water bubbles like acid, and it's said that no man has ever seen the bottom of the mire. Undeterred, Beowulf dons his war gear and bravely plunges into the depths of the Grendelkin's lair, swimming for the better part of a day before being able to see the bottom. His approach does not go unnoticed, attracting the terrible sea beast. So she lunged and clutched and managed to catch him in a brutal grip, but his body, for all that, remained unscathed. The mesh of the chainmail saved him on the outside. Her savage talons failed to rip the web of his war shirt. Another major key towards the significance of Grendel's mother is her title. Grendel's mother, both within and outside of the text, is only ever referred to as Grendel's mother. The two words surmising her name automatically bind her to the confines of her gender, with mother permanently tying her to motherhood, an inherently female trait, and with Grendel's inextricably relating her being as contingent to her son, a noticeably masculine and more texturally developed character. Additionally, the section of the text devoted to Grendel's mother is noticeably roughly half of that dedicated to either her son or the dragon. By being so tightly bound to her sex, the oppressive nature of Anglo-Saxon gender norms are brought to light by the presence of her character. The hero observed that swamp thing from hell, that Tarn hag in all her terrible strength, then heaved his war sword and swung his arm. The decorated blade came down ringing and singing on her head. But he soon found his battle torch extinguished. The shining blade refused to bite. It spared her and failed the man in his need. Then, in a fury, he flung his sword away. The keen, inlaid, warm loop-patterned steel was hurled to the ground. He would have to rely on the might of his arm. So must a man do who intends to gain enduring glory in a combat. Life doesn't cost him a thought. Then the Prince of Wargates, warming to this fight with Grendel's mother, gripped her shoulder and laid about him in a battle frenzy. He pitched his killer opponent to the floor, but she rose quickly and retaliated, grappled him tightly in her grim embrace. Then he saw a blade that boded well, a sword in her armory, an ancient heirloom from the days of the giants, an ideal weapon, one that any warrior would envy. But so huge and heavy of itself, only Beowulf could wield it in a battle. So the shielding's hero, hard-pressed and enraged, took a firm hold of the hilt and swung the blade in an arc, a resolute blow that bit deep into her neckbone and severed it entirely, toppling the doomed house of her flesh. She fell to the floor. The sword dripped blood, the swordsman was elated. And so Beowulf slays the second monster of the epic. Similarly to her son, through her motivations, actions, and thematic presentation, we are keyed into Grendel's mother's role as a manifestation of Anglo-Saxon gender norms and what it looks like for a female figure to violate those norms. Having saved Denmark twice now, Beowulf has fulfilled his duty and returns home to Gateland, where he soon succeeds the previous ruler and assumes the title of king. He is a good king, ruling for 50 long years, and in that time, as do all men, Beowulf grows older and weaker. One day, having been angered by a thief stealing one of its many treasures, a terrible dragon begins wreaking havoc on Gateland. Just as he has done in the past, Beowulf dons his war gear and bravely swears to his subjects that he will vanquish this beast. And although he could easily mobilize an entire army against the monster, Beowulf, in his pride, does not. Yet the Prince of the Rings was too proud to line up with a large army against the Sky Plague. He had scant regard for the dragon as a threat, no dread at all of its courage or strength, for he had kept going often in the past, through perils and ordeals of every sort, after he had purged Hrothgar's hall, triumphed in Harrowit, and beaten Grendel. He outgrappled the monster and his evil kin. So confident that the coming battle will transpire just as his fights with the Grendelkin did, Beowulf sets out with a small troop of men for the dragon's den. Upon arrival, angry with the beast for the hardship it has caused his people, Beowulf rushes into battle. Then he gave a shout. The Lord of the Gates unburdened his breast and broke out in a storm of anger. The Horde Guard recognized a human voice. The time was over for peace and parleying. Pouring forth in a hot battle fume, the breath of the monster burst from the rock. Unyielding, the lord of his people loomed by his tall shield, sure of his ground, while the serpent looped and unleashed itself. Swaddled in flames, it came gliding and flexing and racing toward its fate. Yet his shield defended the renowned leader's life and limb for a shorter time than he meant it to. That final day was the first time when Beowulf fought and fate denied him glory in battle. So the King of the Gates raised his hand and struck hard at the enameled scales, but scarcely cut through. The blade flashed and slashed, yet the blow was far less powerful than the hard-pressed king had need of at that moment. For the first time in his entire life, the invincible Beowulf finds himself in the midst of a losing battle. Perhaps if he had brought his entire army to the dragon's den to assist him, as he had the opportunity to do before, then he might not have been as worse for wear. But of course, in his pride, Beowulf decides to only bring his small, hand-picked troop, a decision that ultimately results in his demise. By acting as the harbinger of his downfall as a result of his own hubris, in this moment, the dragon symbolizes Beowulf's pride, a profoundly difficult obstacle to overcome. A Upon seeing their king at death's door, Beowulf's tiny troop of soldiers promptly abandons him in favor of their own hides. The entire troop, that is, except for one. Despite his lack of experience, the young soldier Wiglaf charges into battle against the dragon, believing that he owes it to Beowulf for his service as a good king. Wiglaf rushes to Beowulf's aid, pleading his commander to continue fighting, to best this terrible monster, just as he had done before. Inspired by his young subject's words, Beowulf presses the attack and swings his sword down upon the skull of the dragon. Yet again his weapon failed him, snapping at the blade, unable to withstand its wielder's strength. The dragon capitalizes on the momentary gap in Beowulf's defenses. When a chance came, he caught the hero in a rush of flame and clamped sharp fangs into his neck. Beowulf's body ran wet with his lifeblood. It came welling out. Next thing, they say, the noble Wiglaf saw the king in danger at his side and displayed his inborn bravery and strength. He lunged at the enemy lower down, so that his decorated sword sank into its belly, and the flames grew weaker. Once again, the king gathered his strength and drew a stabbing knife he carried on his belt, sharpened for battle. He stuck it deep into the dragon's flank. Beowulf had dealt it a deadly wound. They had killed the enemy. Courage quelled his life. That pair of kinsmen, partners in nobility, had destroyed the foe. As another testament to the monster's status as a manifestation of Beowulf's pride, it is only when he expresses humility and relies on the assistance of Wiglaf that the dragon is slain. The pair's victory over the beast is the only in the novel portrayed as a joint victory, as it is the only in which Beowulf necessitates the strength of another. Alas, despite their victory, the great king's time has finally come. Then the wound dealt by the ground burner earlier began to scald and swell. Beowulf discovered deadly poison suppurating inside him, surges of nausea, and so, in his wisdom, the prince realized his state and struggled towards a seat on the rampart. He steadied his gaze on those gigantic stones, saw how the earthwork was braced with arches built over columns. Beowulf's death at the hands of the dragon's venom is peaceful and profoundly heroic. He accepts his own death, just as he managed to accept help in combat, conquering his own pride as his final act upon the earth. Thus, through Beowulf's unfounded expectations of the ease of the battle, through the joint nature of its defeat, and through its status as his final opponent, the dragon in the epic resolutely embodies Beowulf's pride. In conclusion, monsters can occupy many forms. Many forms physically, whether it be the descendant of a biblical evil or a fire-belching reptilian beast. Yet perhaps even more so, as we have seen, monsters take many forms symbolically, as a primordial concept of life, a manifestation of a societal ideal, or as a reflection of the hero destined to slay it. There is no better collection of symbolically significant beasts than with the monsters of the epic of Beowulf. A video by Evan Stresser.